Hey everybody, it's Randy Ray, the literate Texan, and you know what? You might be through with June on the Range, but June on the Range ain't through with you necessarily. I've got another June on the Range video tonight. This one is about 10 Western novels that I really want to read and haven't read yet. And funny thing about Western novels, if they're really, really good ones or really great ones or whatever, they tend to get made into movies. And so I think every single one of the Western novels on this list I came through because I heard about the movie of them. Now, these aren't in any particular order. I am including the authors and the year of publication. The movies for these are always 2, 3, sometimes 10, 15 years later. But I do want to point out that the classic Old West setting in terms of times. Can y'all see my dog back there? Hey, Brock. That's my puppy. He's photobombing us here. But the classic time period for the Western is from 1865 to 1890. But a lot of Westerns, especially newer Westerns, are set maybe in the 1850s. They're more historical novels, or some of them are set even later than that. And I'm also particularly fond of what you call a neo-Western or contemporary Western. And these are movies or books that look on the Old West as more of a time of mythology and myth rather than a specific historical time period. So, I'll talk about that if it becomes relevant. I don't know a whole lot about all these books other than I want to read them and I've seen the movie version of each of them. The first one on my list of 10 Western novels that I haven't read yet but really want to is Blood Meridian by Cormac McCarthy. And this one, I have to admit, I've started 2 or 3 times, and I find it to be a difficult book to read. Cormac McCarthy doesn't like punctuation, apparently. So, he doesn't use quotation marks or commas. It makes it difficult for me as a reader to keep up. He also uses foreign language. There's a lot of Spanish, and then there are some words I'm not sure if they're Spanish or not, but it makes for a difficult read. The plot has something to do with the main character from Tennessee named the Kid, who gets mixed up with the Glaston gang in the 1850s, who would go around and scalp Indians. And, I think at one time, it was published in, 1985. So it was published right around the same time as Lonesome Dove. And I think there was a little bit of a competition between the two novels as to which one was going to be the great American novel, which one was going to be the great American novel of the West. I feel like Lonesome Dove probably won out because it was more accessible than Blood Meridian. But there's also a character who seems really mythological in Blood Meridian named the Judge, who's described as being, if I remember correctly, 7 feet tall and without a stitch of hair anywhere on his body. I think he's meant to represent the devil. But just because a book is hard to read does not mean that it is not worthwhile. It does not mean that it's not a good book. It just means that, maybe I'm not ready for it yet. And it may turn out that I get ready for it, read it, and decide it's a bad movie. It's very possible too. But Blood Meridian's definitely on my list of Western novels that I really still want to read. Okay, number 2 on my list is one I haven't thought about much, but some of my friends who are also participating in June on the Range have mentioned a novel called Little Big Man, which was written by Thomas Berger and published in 1964, but it was made into a film starring Dustin Hoffman. The premise is it's a picaresque novel, which one of my favorite kind of novels. It's about a picaro, someone wandering around getting involved in adventures. And the main character is a 111-year-old white man who was raised by Indians. And he's played by Dustin Hoffman in the film. There's no corroborating evidence that any of the adventures that he relates during his story actually happened. So it sounds like it's going to be a good little bit of fun. I don't really know much more about it other than that, although I have friends who've seen the movie and they said they really liked it. So Little Big Man is number 2 on my list of Western novels I still need to see. Number 3 is called The Sisters Brothers, which was written by Patrick DeWitt. And it was recommended to me because a friend of mine, Gary, who lives out in Tyler, Texas, great guy, used to be a health inspector for the city of Denton here, but now he's retired and lives in Tyler, Texas. But in 2011, I guess they published a novel about the Sisters Brothers. They're a couple of assassins and they're on a particular mission sometime during the Old West. That's all I know about it. But if Gary said it was a good movie and it was well written, I can trust Gary's opinion, and you can too. So it's on my list. Number 4 is Butcher's Crossing, which was published in 1960 and written by John Williams. And no, not the John Williams that wrote the Star Wars theme, but the John Williams that wrote the novel Stoner, which I happen to really like. I thought Stoner was a really good novel. Butcher's Crossing, from what I understand, has to do with a buffalo hunt and a small town named Butcher's Crossing. I don't have any more details about the book than that. I know there was a movie about it that came out recently that I believe stars Nicolas Cage. That was number 4. Number 5 is The Searchers, which was published in 1954 and written by Alan LeMay. Okay, so if you watched some of my recent videos, you probably know that The Searchers is probably pretty close to my favorite movie of all time. Definitely towards the top of my list of favorite Western movies of all time. So naturally, I'm curious to see what the novel is like. I think it would be really hard for the novel to beat the movie in this case because The Searchers is just really terrific. Number 6 is one that's actually really special to me. It's called The Brave Cowboy, which was written by Edward Abbey and published in 1956. The Brave Cowboy is set in the late 40s, early 50s. It's about a cowboy who refuses to comply with the draft. And Edward Abbey was a wilderness writer and also an anarchist and sort of a libertarian. But the main character in The Brave Cowboy, this was only his second published novel. His first published novel was Black Sun, which is also great. It's about a park ranger who falls in love. But anyway, it turns into a manhunt. You know, he's stuck in the old ways of being an independent cowboy, and the world has moved on. And that character shows up in several of Abbey's other novels. I think he wrote about 7 or 8 novels, one of which was called Good News and is a science fiction novel, but it also has to do with cowboys. And Jack Burns, the main character from The Brave Cowboy, is it. But the movie was called Lonesome or the Brave and starred Kirk Douglas. I haven't seen the movie for this one either, but I'm more interested in the novel anyway because I'm such a big fan of Edward Abbey's writing. And then a 1983 novel by Ron Hansen called The Assassination of Jesse James by the Coward Robert Ford. And when I first saw this movie, I was watching it, it was really long and it was really slow paced. And about, I don't know, halfway through it, I was like, I don't know if I like this movie or not. But by the end of it, it had won me over for sure. They really stuck the landing on that one. So I don't know how long the novel is, but I have a suspicion I'm going to like it, and it definitely makes my list here. So, and then I've got a Larry McMurtry novel at number 8 here, 1987, Texasville. So if you've also been watching, you know, recently I reviewed a novel called Dwayne's Depressed, which is number 3 in a series of novels that started with The Last Picture Show. And The Last Picture Show was published, I think, it was set in around 1951, 1952, something like that. Texasville is the sequel, which is set in the mid-1980s. It's set 30 years after The Last Picture Show. The main characters are still up to the same stuff they were up to as they were teenagers. And in the movies, they're played by the same characters, and they're even both directed by Peter Bogdanovich, who's one of my favorite directors. I have not seen the movie Texasville, although I've seen The Last Picture Show multiple times. I've read the novel The Last Picture Show multiple times. I've read Dwayne's Depressed once, but I haven't read Texasville at all. But this is one of those novels and movies that would fall into that category of neo-Western or contemporary Western. And I actually have it downloaded and ready to go on my Kindle. So it's coming up next. I'm in the middle of Morning at Payback Peak by Gene Hackman right now. It's the only Western novel I know of that Gene Hackman wrote. I suspect it was co-written with a ghostwriter, but it's not bad. It's not bad. But it doesn't have much to do with Texasville. Texasville looks like something I'm looking forward to reading now. Big fan of Larry McMurtry and his work in the neo-Western fields. The next on my list, number 9, and I'm cheating a little bit here. It's the Gunslinger series or the Dark Tower series by Stephen King, which was first published in 1982 with the first book, The Gunslinger. I believe there have been 7 or 8 novels since then, but it's about a gunslinger from the Old West, Clint Eastwood type, man with no name type character. And there's Brock back there again, photobombing us. But it's also kind of a weird Western science fiction fantasy type thing where he takes a lot of people under his wing. There are flashbacks to him being trained as a gunslinger. I've read the first 2 or 3 novels in the series, but not the other ones. But it is a series that I would like to read all the way through. So I'm cheating by including that as one book. And then finally, at number 10, I have 1993's Streets of Laredo, also by Larry McMurtry. This is the sequel to Lonesome Dove. And my understanding is that if you liked Lonesome Dove, Streets of Laredo is going to be a disappointment. I'm going to read it anyway. There are 4 books that Larry McMurtry wrote in the Lonesome Dove series. Streets of Laredo is the second one, and I believe is the direct sequel. The final 2 books, I understand, are both prequels to Lonesome Dove. They talk a little bit more about what happened with the younger characters when they were still Texas Rangers and out doing their thing. And that's my list of 10 Western novels that I've been meaning to read but haven't gotten to yet, but would really like to get to. I'm hoping to get through some of those this June, because June's far from over yet. Like I say, you might be through with June on the Range, but June on the Range may not be through with you. And I've got more videos coming up, more videos about June on the Range, in fact. And until you watch those, stay sexy and keep yourself hydrated. I made it through that whole video without taking a drink of water. I don't know if you noticed or not. Thanks for watching.